So good to be together this evening. Grateful again for the opportunity to open up God's Word and study here together. And we're going to be staying here in 2 Kings chapter 4 and really just making a few observations that I know I've found very encouraging from the events that are recorded here. And they truly are really just an encouraging lesson, even with the tragic event that does happen, but yet how it is resolved. And we see this picture of so many really just kind of heartwarming and encouraging moments in this behavior between these two individuals. We see elements of humility. We see elements of genuine service to God. We see elements of true faith and deep trust and abiding confidence that God will hold all things together even when it seems like the worst tragedies have come upon us. And so with that being said, just there the text is before us. We're just going to walk through here these different statements that we have revealed to us that I find it just be kind of a very rich picture of just really the love that is shared between individuals who love God, who trust God, and mutually want to help each other in their service to God. We see that there in verse 8, it says, there came a day when Elisha passed over to Shunem, where there was a prominent woman. In other words, this was a woman who was very wealthy. This is a very prominent woman in that she is very well off. And we see the generosity of this woman and also really the genuine spirit of this woman, of what she was devoted to doing with the advantages that she had. That this is a woman who has quite a bit. And it says, and she persuaded him to eat food. And so we see this prominence of the woman, but we also, I love, in this one little sentence, you see, I love this description of Elisha. Elisha is a man who's very well known. Elisha is a man who is known among individuals who trust God, who depend upon people to lead them to God, and yet he is not one of these people that feels a sense of entitlement. Did you catch that? She had to persuade him to come to her house. But as he passed through, he knew this woman, no doubt, would say, well, I know where I'm going to dinner for tonight. I know, probably, no doubt she'd want to have me. She had to persuade him. You catch that picture? Here's a man, no doubt, he's living probably pretty humbly. And no doubt she saw the way and the means in which he was living, the kind of way he was providing for himself. She said, come into our house. We have so much, and we would love to share it with you. And that's this woman, two genuine people. I find that very heartwarming. Genuine spirit of a genuine servant of God who's not having a spirit of entitlement, not a spirit of conceitedness, genuine humility, who's just wanting to serve God, who's not asking for anything more than just to be loyal to the Lord. And then this woman who has quite a bit, and she just wants to help this man, and she persuades him, and by persuasion, she finally convinces him, okay, well, since a reluctance, I'll go to your house. But then this beautiful arrangement happens where he would continually go to her house and would know the family and got to know them, and they no doubt got to know one another, and they enjoyed this beautiful arrangement where it says, she said to her husband, or it says, and so it was as often as he passed by, he turned in there to eat food. It was this amazing arrangement where they trusted one another, that they were basically just wanting to help this individual be comfortable. And he began to, no doubt, take a great sense of gratitude and to know her very well. And then we see that this woman decides, there's got to be something more. It wasn't enough just that she was able to provide some comfort momentarily when he would come in. And she said, and I love the detail she goes into. You can almost imagine her picturing her. What can we do to just make sure that this man of God has, all the things that would make it easier for him or helpful for him in any way. And so she goes this great detail and encourages her husband. And she talks to her husband and she says, she said to her husband there, verse 9, behold, now I perceive that this is a holy man of God passing by us continually. Please, let us make a little walled upper chamber and let us set a bed for him there and a table and a chair and a lampstand. She's going to all the work. She's like, we want to make this a place where he just really knows where else you're going to find this kind of treatment. And she's going to that. I want him to know that we care and we respect the work. That this is a holy man of God. And so she wants in some way to contribute and let him know, we simply want you to know We respect the God that you're serving. We respect what you're doing. And let us help you. And so they did. And Elisha is so grateful. And he continued. You can picture Elisha there, maybe sitting in the table, studying or meditating, praying, and thinking, what? We got to do something for this woman. Again, that genuine spirit of gratitude, appreciation, not entitlement. No, well, it's about time someone made something like that for me. It was total opposite. It was, I can't believe she did all this. This is nice. This is great. I like this. And she deserves to have something to know we appreciate that. She didn't have to go through all that trouble for me. It's really his spirit. And so it says there in verse 11, one day he came there and turned into the upper chamber and rested. And he's enjoying that rest. And then he said to Gehazi, his servant, call this Shunammite. And when he called her, she stood before him. And he said to him, say now to her, behold, you have been careful for us with all this care. What can I do for you? And I love what he says. Would you be spoken for the king or to the captain of the army? I've got some connections. There's some very powerful people that I have some intergoings with. Maybe there's some issue. Maybe we could settle for you. Some issue. Maybe it's causing you some trouble, some distress. I can talk to you. I'm sure they'd swiftly maybe handle the issue. And then we see the genuineness of the woman. She did not do this for anything in return. And she says, no, I'm good. She says, in fact, I live among my own people. We handle our disputes. She says, I live with good people. We're good neighbors. I'm blessed with a good neighborhood I live in. In other words, we take care of each other. And I trust that that's going to continue to go on. And so you don't need to go through all that trouble. And I love, again, that genuine spirit. Just someone who just genuinely wanted to help. And for no other reason than, can I help make this individual ease whatever difficulties they're having, and to know that it's an encouraging thing that what he was doing. And so they're sitting there thinking, well, we got to do something. That's not. I can't accept that she just doesn't want any help. And so he said, what then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, truly she has no son, and her husband is old. So Elisha, okay, yeah. Okay, I think I know how we're going to help her. So he said, call her. And then again, notice that it says, when he had called her, she stood in the doorway. I love this. She has a sense of reservedness, right? She's not this, oh, I bet I'm going to get something now. Yeah, when you called me. She stands in the doorway. He says this reluctance of, you really don't have to do anything for me. She knows she's coming her, and it's not this sense of just, I'm really, I know it's coming. In fact, what he says totally, she can't even begin to wrap her mind around what he says he's going to do for her. In fact, in a moment, she says, please don't even tease and don't even joke about a subject like this, that I don't have a child, and I know it's kind of you to recognize that I don't have one. But please, don't even mention things like that around me. It's not something I want to talk about, that I want to deal with. You know what he says? He says, call her. And when he called her, she stood in the doorway, and he said, at this season next year, you will embrace his son. And she said, no, my Lord. Oh, man of God, do not lie to your maidservant. But this is something that would be way too much for her, to have her hopes built on something like this, only to not be able to deliver. Don't even say it. And amazingly, in verse 17, the woman conceived and bore a son at that season the next year, as Elisha had said to her. And then sadly, tragically, even at her own hesitance to even accept that this would be done for her, she loses the child. It says, when the child was grown, the day came that he went out to his father to the reapers. And verse 19, he said to his father, my head, my head. And he said to his servant, carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat in her lap until noon and then died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God and shut the door behind him and went out. And she called to her husband and said, please, Send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys that I may run to the man of God and return. She doesn't even tell her husband that the child died. She doesn't mention it. All she says is, we're going on a journey and I need to go see the man of God. Notice, and he's kind of puzzled by this. Well, wait a minute. This seems odd. It's not a new moon or a Sabbath. It's not the regular times that I would expect and understand that you would want to go be there. He said, verse 23, why will you go to him today? It is neither a new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, it's okay. It will be well. A woman of genuine spirit, genuine humility, who even at her protest is saying, please don't, I want you to recognize what a sore spot this is for me. And no doubt how amazed she was, how grateful she was. She has a son. The son has been taken, and now she knows, I know what to do. I know what to do. It will be well. And I know that in this tragic moment, I trust the servant of God, and I know if I go to him, that something's going to be okay. And so she does. In verse 24, she's in great haste to get there. She saddled a donkey and said to her servant, drive and go forward. Do not slow down the pace for me unless I tell you. So she went and came to the man of God to Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her at a distance, he said to Gehazi, again, notice I love the genuineness of Elisha. Elisha recognizes the woman. Oh, it's the Shunammite woman. Ask her, is it okay? Are you okay? Is your son okay? Is your husband okay? We recognize there was a genuine connection, right? A genuine kind of bond that was formed there. He knows about this woman's life and is very concerned about her, knows that she wouldn't be coming unless maybe something is happening. So he's concerned about her. Genuine concern. How are things with you? I genuinely want to know. And he says, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, it is well. It is well. That's the message she gives to Gehazi. It's okay. I recognize that to some degree, I believe that the part of her short response, I think, indicates she recognizes there's only one person that she can really deal with right now. Gehazi is the servant. She's determined, I'm not talking to anybody except for Elisha. In other words, she trusts his, she knows this is a man of God. This is someone who no doubt has a connection with God, and she is trusting that. And she wants to go to him. So she gives his answers to Gehazi. Notice, it's okay. Verse 27, when she came to the man of God, to the hill, she caught hold of his feet, and Gehazi came near. And notice Gehazi wants to push her away. Gehazi came near to push her away, but the man of God said, I love this. This is what the man of God said to Elisha. A true statement of genuine love and concern. Let her alone, for her soul is troubled within her, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. Which here's Elisha's answer. God has not given me any indication why it's here, but I know when a woman is in distress. I know the signs. I know what it looks like when a woman is troubled. And I could tell on her face. In other words, I'm not serving you because God told me to help you. I'm not responding to this woman just because God specifically said, this is the woman you did. He genuinely loves people. He genuinely cares for this woman. He genuinely wants to know. And he kind of rebukes God. No, let her come near. This woman is in distress. This woman is troubled. I can tell. And we need to help find out what we can do for her. And so she tells him, but notice what she says. In verse 28, then she said, did I ask for a son from my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me? From this statement, I believe we have a whole window that opens up in the backstory of this woman's life. She has indicated there's a reason why I was very hesitant for you to even to say anything about this. And I told you, I did not even ask for this. Can you picture this woman? This woman has had deep sorrow and deep grief in her life. Either she had lost a son or she had never had one. either of the two, she had been dealing with the grief and the struggle of she doesn't have a child, and her husband is too old, she can't have one. Somewhere along the way, she had already said the words, "It will be well," at a previous moment in her life. In other words, as we picture this woman, deep with distraught, deep with grief, deep with frustration, answers, why don't I have a son? Why did this happen? Why am I left alone? Why can't we enjoy that blessing of having this? And with all those questions, with all those answers of frustration, somewhere along the way, she said, "It will be well." How is it going to be well? Well, this is a woman who decided to turn her grief into serving others. That's what she did. In other words, Elisha never knew this, right? When he met the Shunammite, he never knew that this was a woman who had great loss in her life. He didn't know these things. But what he found out was this is a woman who took deep level of concern to care for a servant of God. This is a woman who decided not to wallow in bitterness in her grief, but said, "I will turn my grief into putting into serving others." But here she's realized, here's the bitter pill. I took my initial grief and I turned it in acceptance to service, that I will deal with it that way. And then you turn my service into grief. This is something that was deeply troubling for her, and is only opening up that series of what she had gone through initially, and now she's dealing with it all over again. And with that, I can't help but be so moved by this woman, and that's what she shows us. That what does it say? What does it mean to say, "It will be well"? Sometimes it's not enough to say, "It is well." Sometimes it isn't well. Sometimes it just isn't. But we can, even in moments when it is not well, say, "It will be well." And she trusted anew. How do we turn grief? How do we turn sadness? How do we turn darkness into light, as we talked about with the possibility of resurrection? It comes from throwing yourself into service. Throw yourself into caring for others. Throw yourself into knowing what it is to care for the concerns of others, and that will turn that grief into something that is something you can deal with. And that's why she said, "Do not bring this subject up. Do not tease me about a child. I don't have one. I've accepted it." That's why I built you that room. That's why I took such detail and care to have you into my home, because I've accepted grief, I've accepted loss, and I've turned it into service. In other words, I've moved on. It is well. In other words, she had been in a moment where she said, "It will be well," and it became well. But amazingly, all of a sudden, all of those feelings are ripped open and they're raw all over again. And what does she say? Just as she had said once before, "It will be well." And she gives herself in devotion essentially to Elisha and says, "I'm not leaving you." Because Elisha has an idea. Elisha decides, okay, well, certainly, yes, almost the idea of, yes, we have to fix this. We have to help her. In verse 29, he said to Gehazi, "Gird up your loins and take my staff in your hand and go your way. If you meet any man, do not salute him. And if anyone salutes you, do not answer him. And lay my staff on the lad's face." The mother of the lad said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." In other words, I trust that you, as a representation really of God, will turn this well. And I'm not leaving until it is. And so in verse 31, Gehazi passed on before them, laid the staff on the lad's face, but there was no sound or response. So he returned to meet him and told him, "The lad has not awakened." In verse 32, when Elisha came into the house, behold, the lad was dead and laid on his bed. So he entered and shut the door behind them both and prayed to the Lord. And he went up and lay on the child and put his mouth on his mouth and his eyes on his eyes and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself on him. And the flesh of the child became warm. Then he returned and walked in the house once back and forth and went up and stretched himself on him. And the lad sneezed 7 times. And the lad opened his eyes. he called Gehazi and said, "Call this Shunammite." So he called her, and when she came into him, he said, "Take up your son." Then she went in and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the ground. And she took up her son and went out. And just so many things come out of that text. And the one, of course, the one just in both the character studies of both Elisha and the woman, I just continually am struck by both of their attitudes and their behavior and the way that they see themselves and as they see others. There's something beautiful to be said about those who genuinely just want to serve God for the purpose of knowing the value of the goodness and the worth of just being a servant. And Elisha was that individual. He clearly was not serving the Lord out of pretense, out of anything other than just the genuineness of knowing that God is worthy of that service, and he was accepting of the conditions and accepting of whatever it is that took for him, whatever sacrifices he needed to make. And as this woman has to encourage him to come to her home, and then we see again the genuineness that Elisha is struck by the same level of genuine spirit. He's struck by her. He realized she didn't have to do this. She did it. And he's so overwhelmed with just that sense of gratitude. What can I do? And I think for me, just the idea that the story becomes much more richer as we see again this backdrop of this woman who is childless. And no doubt she's even pointing out that's such a sore spot for her. And yet, regardless of whatever tragedy had she had to deal with, whether it was not having children at all, or maybe she had a child and the child died, we don't know. But to some extent, she resolved it by saying, "It will be well," and trusting, "I will make myself of whatever use I can for the need of others." So we see Jesus essentially showing us throughout his life that's how Jesus handled his own grief. Really, not grief that he had previously suffered, but grief that Jesus was anticipating he was going to suffer. And Jesus showed us in a very beautiful way how he decided he was going to mentally, emotionally, physically even, push through the thoughts of, I anticipate I'm going to experience great tragic pain and loss. And he decided he was going to throw himself into service. We see this in John chapter 13, beginning in verse 1. It says, "Now before the feast of the Passover, Jesus noticed, knowing that his hour had come, that he would depart out of this world to the Father." And that departure would be the most brutal, gruesome, vicious way of departure. He would leave this world in humiliation, bleeding and suffering, gasping for air, saying things like, "I'm thirsty, and it is finished." And knowing all these things, it says, verse 2, during supper, the devil, having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come forth from God and was going back to God, he got up from supper and laid aside his garments, and taking a towel, he girded himself. He threw himself into service. Then he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. So he came to Simon Peter, and he said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered and said to him, "What I do you do not realize now, but you will understand hereafter." What does he mean by that? You will not understand until later. Well, later they're going to realize you did all of this knowing what you were going to go through just moments after. You did all of that for us, knowing what you were going to go through. They didn't piece it together until after they realized he was about to die. They have no clue. That is not even, they've dismissed the fact of his, they don't even have a single clue the amount of suffering he's about to go through, or how much is weighing on his own mind. And so I love when he says, "No doubt you will put it together after." And no doubt they did. Because in like fashion, we see that the lives of these apostles was affected by someone who genuinely loved them even to the point of death. that they then threw themselves into service. Every single one of them. Every single apostle, save Judas, died throwing themselves into service. We already talked about Peter, right? You're going to die in service to me. I know that you will be that dedicated one who, out of gratitude for what I've done, you will throw yourself literally into such service. You will give your life for me. And so notice in there it says in verse 8, Peter said to him, "Never shall you wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, then wash not only my feet, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "He who has bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not all of you." For he knew the one who was betraying him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." So when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and reclined at the table again, he said to them, "Do you know what I've done? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I, then, the Lord and the teacher, wash feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you also should do as I did to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is one who is sent greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed." Notice, if you do them. Sometimes that really is the way that God is able to say something that truly is not well. How it has the ability from the perspective of the Shunammite woman and the perspective of Jesus, how can it, yes, eventually it will be well. Put our faith and trust that God, of all those who has the ability to sympathize, understands and is willing to take those moments and take those issues of our life, and yes, to truly not even cause a resurrection, but to transform in resurrection. To turn that which is dark into that which is light. To turn that which is painful, to turn it into something that actually brings joy. Jesus shows us through his sufferings on the cross that he was willing and able to do that. In fact, that's the passage of Hebrews chapter 12 where it says, "For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Despising the shame, he has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." Jesus said, "It will be well," even on the cross. And he literally just looked at it as an act of service and put himself in full devotion. And it turned into something that he could find joy and satisfaction and something that gave him peace. I find that that's a true great lesson from the Shunammite, from Jesus himself. But also let us recognize that it must be genuine. It must be of genuine humility, of genuine faith, of no other reason than to simply recognize the worthiness of the Lord, to trust the Lord, and to know the goodness that comes from giving ourselves wholly to the Lord. He said, "You will be blessed if you do that." And that's what he was alluding to. He said, "You have no clue what I'm about to suffer." After you do, and you find out that this is how he made it well to get through it, was in giving himself in devotion to the Lord and to others. And so what a blessing that we can find and that we can say, as the Shunammite said, "It will be well." And Jesus gives us that ability to say, yes, it will be well. Let us trust him and let us have confidence that we can find that same sense. We see others, we can do all kinds of studies with Paul and the other apostles. They showed us so much of that's how they got through, and that's how we can get through it as well. If you're with us who's never obeyed the gospel of Jesus Christ, we encourage you that you would put your faith and trust in the things that Jesus, yes, showed us and demonstrated. That he himself, yes, was able to find joy, peace, and completeness in giving himself as a servant to others, to us. And he demonstrates to us that that's what he wants to transform. He recognizes, yes, we go through painful situations in life often, whether by the consequence of our own sins that we suffer with or just the sinfulness of the world itself. And rather than hardening our hearts, rather than retreating in a sense of bitterness, trust the Lord. Trust the goodness of the Lord, who's able to take us and take that pain and take all of that and turn it into something that can be something worthy of devotion, and that genuine love can truly grow in us as we seek him and follow him. Won't you confess that Jesus, yes, is the Christ, the Son of the living God, the demonstration of that love and the true resurrection, who wants to resurrect us all to a greater level of service and love ourselves. He can transform us, forgive us of our sins if we are baptized for the forgiveness of our sins. Anyone who's done that, but perhaps sadness, tragedy, darkness has entered into your life, trust the Lord. Trust that, yes, as the Shunammite woman and Elisha himself showed, service, devotion can often be the thing that is needed to heal, to bring us to a greater level of love that gives us that sense of peace and gives us that ultimate joy. And that we will be rewarded one day. The Bible tells us we will be eternally rewarded if we can find that in this moment in life. Won't you come to the Lord and devote yourself to him, whether it's through baptism or through recommitting yourself to him? We can help you in some way. Won't you come to the front? We'll gladly assist you while we stand and sing the psalm of encouragement.